The airport smelled like rain and jet fuel, a mix of endings and beginnings. My hands didn't shake when I handed over the new passport. The name printed inside wasn't mine, not anymore. It belonged to someone who never loved her, never trusted her, never even existed in her world. She said I'd never survive without her, I whisper, the words barely touching the air. Maybe she was right. But the man she knew doesn't exist anymore. As the officer stamps the page, I glance up at the departure board, one flight blinking, then gone. A flicker crosses my mind, her laughter, bright and careless, tangled with someone else's voice. The sound that once anchored me now feels like static. By the time she realizes what I've done, I'll be nothing more than a ghost, her last memory of me fading into silence. Love has a strange way of disguising control. At first, it feels like surrender, the good kind. The kind that makes you believe giving up pieces of yourself is proof of devotion. That's what loving Lila felt like. Every compromise, every late night at work, every quiet moment where I let her fill the silence with her brightness, it all felt worth it. Our mornings were small rituals stitched into routine. I'd wake before her, grind the coffee beans just the way she liked, coarse, earthy, with a hint of vanilla. She'd wander out of the bedroom wrapped in that faded gray robe, hair tangled, eyes half shut. She'd always smile when she saw the mug waiting. "You spoil me," she'd say. "I like spoiling you," I'd reply. And I meant it. We had our soundtrack, a playlist we built over years, little songs tucked between memories. Some mornings she'd hum along while sketching at the kitchen table, pencils scattered, sunlight spilling over her shoulder. She had a way of looking effortlessly alive, like she existed in a world slightly warmer than everyone else's. I used to think that was why I loved her, because she made life feel brighter. But looking back, maybe I just wanted to be close to her light, even if it burned. Lila was a freelance designer, bold, creative, always surrounded by people who adored her energy. I, on the other hand, worked long hours in an office where fluorescent lights hummed and spreadsheets dictated time. I'd come home exhausted, but the moment she looked up from her laptop and said, "There you are," it felt exhaling after holding my breath all day. She'd call me her safe place. Said that when the world overwhelmed her, my steadiness grounded her. I held on to those words like a vow. When she got frustrated with clients or doubted her work, I'd listen for hours, reassuring her that she was brilliant, that she could do anything. The imbalance started small. She needed more of me, I needed less of myself. She wanted to be surrounded by people, I was happy just being near her. When her friends threw parties, I tagged along, fading into the background while she lit up the room. They all loved her, the way she laughed too loud, the way her eyes darted around like she was afraid of missing something. Sometimes I'd catch someone looking at her with that quiet admiration I used to feel. And instead of pride, I'd feel small. Invisible. But I told myself love wasn't about equality, it was about giving. About being the anchor for the one who drifts. When she got offered a long-term design contract in the city, I celebrated with her. When I got offered a job abroad, one that would have doubled my salary and pushed my career forward, I turned it down. She said she couldn't leave her family, her clients, her network. "It's just a job," she told me, curling against my chest that night. "You'll get another one." She fell asleep easily after that. I didn't. I lay there listening to her steady breathing, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. I told myself it was love. Maybe it was. But love can feel a lot like surrender when you stop noticing the parts of yourself you're giving away. We built a life filled with little comforts, the worn couch that sagged in the middle, the kitchen window that stuck in winter, the shelf of travel books for trips we never took. I believed in that world completely. I believed in her. She'd touch my face sometimes, out of nowhere, and say, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And every time, I'd smile and tell her, "You'll never have to find out." Funny how promises sound so solid when you're standing on ground you think will never crack. If I'd known that love could be weaponized, I would have never handed her the ammunition. It started with little things, the kind you only notice when the silence between two people stretches too long. Lila began working late. At first, it made sense, her freelance work was unpredictable, deadlines piled up, and she thrived under pressure. But then, the late nights became habitual. She'd leave with her laptop and sketchbook, saying she needed space to focus, which used to mean the living room couch. Now, it meant somewhere else. She'd come home past midnight, smelling faintly of perfume I didn't recognize. It wasn't hers, not the soft jasmine scent she'd worn for years. This one was sharper, headier, the kind that lingered even after she showered. "You're still up?" she'd ask, voice casual, eyes a little too bright. "Couldn't sleep," I'd say, watching her move around the kitchen. She'd hum a tune, pour herself water, and avoid looking directly at me. I told myself it was stressful. That I was overanalyzing. That love means trust, even when the pieces don't fit neatly anymore. Still, I noticed how her phone never left her hand. How she'd angle the screen away when I walked by, fingers moving quickly before the screen dimmed. How her laughter, once so effortless, now sounded like something rehearsed. It's strange how you start gaslighting yourself. How you convince your own mind that the ache in your gut is just insecurity. I'd remind myself of how devoted she used to be. How she once called me her safe place. And then I'd hear her phone buzz again, see the way she smiled at it, and I'd feel something inside me twist. One night, I caught my reflection in the window as she scrolled through her messages. My face looked older, smaller somehow. Like I was disappearing in slow motion while she bloomed somewhere far away from me. At dinner, she'd push her food around her plate, distracted. "Long day?" I'd ask. "Amicham." She wouldn't elaborate. The warmth between us had thinned, not gone, just stretched, transparent. Sometimes, when she'd laugh at something on her phone, I'd ask what it was. "Just a meme," she'd say, placing the phone face down. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But when you love someone, you can feel when you're being quietly erased. Our friends noticed too. At a dinner party, one of them, Mara, leaned close and whispered, "You two are still good? Haven't seen you together much lately." I smiled, too quick. "Just busy." Mara gave me that look, the one people use when they know more than they'll admit. The next morning, Lila was unusually cheerful. Made pancakes, played our old playlist. I wanted to believe it was a reset, that maybe she felt the distance too and wanted to fix it. But halfway through breakfast, her phone rang. She smiled at the screen, then silenced it. "Work?" I asked. "Yeah. Client emergency." She left 15 minutes later. I stared at her empty chair, the syrup cooling on her plate. A week later, I tried to reconnect. Planned a weekend getaway to the cabin by the lake, the one where we spent our anniversary 2 years ago. I booked it, cleaned the car, and packed her favorite snacks. When I told her, she froze. "Oh. Ethan, I can't." "Can't?" "Deadline. Huge project. I can't just drop everything." I nodded slowly. "It's just one weekend." She looked guilty, or maybe just annoyed. "Next time, okay?" That night, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the soft glow under the bedroom door. I could hear her typing. Or maybe not typing. Maybe texting. The rhythm was different. The next day, I left for a 2-day business trip. She kissed me goodbye, quick, distracted. "Drive safe," she said. When I got back, the house felt off. The air was still, like it was hiding something. In the sink were 2 wine glasses. Both faintly stained with red. We didn't own matching wine glasses, I'd broken 1 month ago. I picked them up slowly. They were freshly washed, still damp. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but something inside me froze instead. My brain replayed every excuse, every late night, every half-smile she gave me when I asked where she'd been. Instead, I placed the glasses back down gently, as if pretending they weren't real could make it true. That evening, when she came home, I asked, "Did you have anyone over?" Her eyes flickered. "What? No. Why?" "Just wondering." She tilted her head. "Why would you ask that?" "I don't know. The house smells like wine." "Oh. I had a glass while working." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Makes sense." She smiled back, a practiced, empty thing, then brushed past me to the bedroom. Later, lying beside her, I listened to the way she breathed. Slow, even, peaceful. My heart pounded like I was the one hiding something. I turned toward her, wanting to shake her awake, to ask for honesty. But her face looked so calm, so untouchable, that I couldn't. Instead, I whispered to the ceiling, "Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just losing her because I stopped being enough." But deep down, beneath all the denial and rationalizing, a colder voice whispered back, "No. You're not losing her. She's already gone." Days passed. Then weeks. The space between us stretched wider, filled with things neither of us said. I watched her disappear in real time, a version of her I didn't recognize smiling in photos she didn't show me, posting captions about growth and freedom. Trust isn't broken in an explosion. It's chipped away in whispers and missing glances. And one night, sitting alone with the half-finished wine she'd left on the counter, I decided I was done pretending not to see. It was time to look the truth in the eye. Truth doesn't arrive like a storm. It creeps in, quiet and deliberate, until it's sitting across from you at the table, smiling like it's always belonged there. It was a Tuesday night when the first undeniable piece of truth found me. I was clearing out old messages on our shared tablet when a notification appeared. A photo preview, blurred, half a face, a name I recognized before my brain even processed it. Ryan. Ryan had been my closest friend since college. He'd stood beside me at our wedding, toasted to a lifetime of loyalty. The kind of man I'd trusted implicitly, which is probably why Lila felt safe enough to hide behind his name. The message itself was harmless on the surface, a simple, "Can't wait to see you tonight," but the timestamp, the tone, and the fact that she'd never mentioned meeting him for anything all twisted together into a knot I couldn't ignore. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I watched. That's the part no one tells you about betrayal, how quiet the discovery can be. How it turns you into a detective of your own downfall. I started noticing things I'd missed before. Her sudden interest in dressing up on days she claimed to be working from home. The way she'd slip her phone into her bag instead of leaving it on the counter. The small smile that lingered on her face after certain text alerts. When she talked about clients, I began to recognize Ryan's name hidden between the sentences. A friend gave me feedback, or someone suggested this new cafe. Always vague, always safe enough to sound innocent. Each lie stacked on the last, fragile and perfect, like glass waiting to shatter. I tried to play my part, the trusting husband. I still brewed her coffee and asked about her day. But every word I spoke felt like an echo in a hollow room. At night, when she rolled away from me, I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering when her warmth had stopped belonging to me. One evening, she said she had a networking dinner. The words came easily, too easily. I smiled and told her to have fun. After she left, I waited 20 minutes, then followed. I wasn't sure what I expected, maybe to catch her in a harmless lie, maybe to shame myself for doubting her. But when I parked near the downtown bistro and saw her through the window, the world went still. She was there, laughing. Not the polite laugh she gave me lately, but the real one, the one that used to break me open with happiness. Across from her sat Ryan. He leaned forward, his hand brushing hers on the table. And she didn't pull away. For a long moment, I just stood there, the cold air biting my face, watching the life I thought I knew unfold without me. I didn't take pictures. Didn't storm in or make a scene. I just watched until they left together, walking close, her hand tucked into his arm the way she used to hold mine. Then I drove home in silence. When she came back later that night, her hair was damp from rain. She smiled faintly when she saw me awake on the couch. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I said. "Couldn't sleep." She walked past me, her perfume trailing like a ghost. "Big day tomorrow." "I'm exhausted." I nodded, and she disappeared into the bedroom. I sat there for a long time, listening to her moving around, the sound of the shower running, drawers opening and closing. It was surreal, watching her exist in a world where I was already gone, where my knowledge didn't yet touch her. Over the next few weeks, I pretended everything was normal. I think part of me wanted to understand why. Not for closure, I already knew there was no logic to betrayal, but for confirmation that I hadn't imagined it all. She'd text while we watched TV, smiling at her phone like a secret. Sometimes I'd ask who it was. "Just a client," she'd say, without looking up. I'd nod. "Ryan again?" That name made her pause, just a fraction of a second, before she recovered. "He's helping me with a design pitch." "Right," I said. "He's always been generous with his time." Her eyes flicked to mine then, searching for accusation. I offered none. I'd learned that silence can be more frightening than anger. The distance between us became unbearable, but I endured it. I still cooked dinner, still asked about her projects, and still kissed her cheek goodnight. Every act of normalcy became a rehearsal for goodbye. Then, one night, the truth finally stepped into the light. She came home later than usual, her eyes red, her voice trembling just enough to sound human again. "Ethan," she said softly, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "We need to talk." I'd been waiting for that line. She didn't even try to hide it. Maybe guilt had finally caught up, or maybe she was just tired of pretending. "I've been seeing someone," she said, voice small. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't ask who. I wanted her to say it. "It's Ryan," she added when I stayed silent. "But it's not what you think. It's complicated." I laughed, not bitterly, just quietly. "Complicated," I repeated. "That's one word for it." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you. She stopped, searching for words. "You made me feel invisible. Like I didn't matter anymore." Invisible. The irony stung. I'd given her everything, time, love, patience, while she drifted towards someone who reflected her shine back at her. She reached for my hand, I didn't move. "Ethan, I still care about you. I just need space to figure things out." "Space," I said softly. "And where exactly should I fit in that space?" Her voice cracked. "Maybe you could stay with your brother for a while. Just until we both think clearly." That was it. The final cut. The humiliation. The quiet erasure of everything I'd built. I stood slowly, nodding. "You want space," I said. "All right." She exhaled with relief, mistaking my calm for acceptance. "Thank you, Ethan. I didn't want it to end ugly." "Neither did I murmured. When she went to bed, I stayed in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of our life, the framed photos, the faint smell of her perfume, the half-empty bottle of wine we'd meant to share. I realized, sitting there, that she hadn't freed herself from me. She'd freed me from the illusion of her. She thought she was setting herself free. In truth, she was setting me loose. Grief is a raw, hot thing at first, hungry and loud. It will make you cry in the supermarket aisle and replay the worst night on loop until your eyes are swollen. But grief mutates. For me, it cooled. It thinned into something that felt almost like air, breathable, unremarkable, and deadly because it went unnoticed. I learned to make plans inside that thinness. I started with the house. Not because I wanted to hurt her with objects, but because possessions are proof. Proof of a life. Proof of presence. If she could strip me of my place in hers with a single confession, I could strip away the scaffolding she'd built around me. I boxed the things that had value, my watch, the camera I'd used in college, the guitar that had gathered dust. I quietly sold the rest, small, anonymous sales online, cash in envelopes slipped into pockets. I did it at odd hours. I paid for the last boxes with exact change, because I wanted no paper trail longer than necessary. I kept the sentimental things, at first. Then I boxed them too and left them in my car overnight before driving away and leaving them in a storage unit with a lock. Even then, I made sure the unit's receipt would never be mailed to our home address. I learned to dislike paper. Paper remembers. I closed accounts. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, no slammed doors, no shouting. Just a series of polite conversations, passwords changed, services cancelled. 1,000 little erasures. I transferred money, legal, quiet transfers, and set up contingencies. I spoke to professionals, but not to the ones you'd think. Lawyers, yes, but not the courtroom kind. They helped me understand the edges of what I could do without stepping into criminal territory. Account consolidations. Property trusts. The language was clinical, almost bland, reassignment, designation, beneficiary. The words made the process feel safe. They made it feel like paperwork instead of betrayal. I learned to manage a life behind a life. I read forums with people who had reinvented themselves, stories where names changed like outfits. Their posts were vague, the successful ones never detailed technique. They talked about mindset, about the quiet rituals, burning bridges slowly so they could be sure they were gone. I adopted their patience. I practiced silence. Meanwhile, I kept the face she recognized. She still texted me. At first, it was scattered, questions about a bill, a message about a lunch she might miss, a picture of the cat because she knew I liked it. I answered every one, polite and unoscillating. Okay. Got it. Take care. When she asked for help, a payment deferred, a call made to a contractor, I did it. I wired money to accounts she named. I corrected mistakes she pretended not to understand. I became functional kindness, helpful, available, and invisible. It was a performance. I learned to perform apathy. I could type the words, send them, and feel nothing. That's the thing about detachment, it feels like armor until it becomes your skin. There were setbacks. Human plans rarely run on rails. Once, an old employer called about a company pension. Another time, the storage unit required additional ID to release a box. I handled each hiccup with the flat efficiency that comes after heartbreak has been processed into logistics. I hired help where I needed it, a private accountant to sort small transfers, a notary for documents. I paid for discretion. Payments were made in ways that left legitimate justification. No theatrics. No theft. No forgery. Just the legal, tight-turning cogs of someone erasing themselves from one ledger and appearing in another. At night, when the city quieted, I sat cross-legged on the floor of the living room with maps and legal papers and lists. I drew lines in pen, not routes or hiding places, but decisions, what to keep, what to let go, who to call if something needed explaining. I invented a life in snippets. A new name. A job description that sounded plausible if someone checked. A rented room in a city 3 hours away. A phone number that didn't link back to our home. I practiced answering it in different voices until my own began to sound foreign. It's surprising how easy it is to disappear when no one's looking for the quiet ones. I wrote in a notebook once, then folded the page and put it in a drawer. I'd learned the truth of that sentence. People notice the cracking windows and the falling plaster. They don't check the man who sits perfectly still on the porch. My transformation wasn't instantaneous. Each small switch felt like shedding a layer of skin. When I closed our joint credit card, I felt oddly cleansed. When I redirected mail to a P.O. box under a business name that sounded ordinary, I felt like a ghost rehearsing its exit. I rewired my digital life the same way, pruning social media until my presence was negligible. Photos were archived to offline drives. Emails were closed or forwarded. My name was softening, losing the edges that pinned me to the past. In public, I was the same person people had always known. At the office, colleagues still said my name. At the market, the clerk packaged my bread by habit. I let the world supply continuity while I rewired my own. It made lying feel negligible. It made me feel like a surgeon performing a quiet operation on my identity. Lila's life, meanwhile, did the opposite. Freedom, as it turned out, is often a hole disguised as opportunity. She moved faster than I expected. The new relationship with Ryan became obvious, not because of public displays, but because of what it cost her. She stopped answering messages as often. The expensive dinners, the weekend trips he could afford, all seemed to fill the emptiness she'd been describing. Friends complimented her glow. Strangers liked her photos. But glowing is a temporary currency. Months later, the debts began to show. The card statements she thought I'd handle arrived at our door with polite envelopes. A contractor called twice a day, then left a voicemail that grew sharp. She missed a client deposit and sent panicked emails. I transferred funds when she asked, smoothing the edges of her panic, refusing confrontation. I wanted her to keep feeling secure while I finished disassembling the scaffolding under her. There were nights when I watched her collapse on the couch, head in hands, and I felt nothing and everything at once. She'd phone Ryan and speak in urgent, fragile tones. He offered plans that required money, resources that pulled on his advantages. They were a bad fit of convenience and ego, and the strain showed. Arguments she used to wave away now had the weight of consequences. She would text me in the small hours sometimes, "Can you help with the contractor? He's been calling all day." I replied with numbers and logistics. I wired money when she asked. I gave her breathing room to be reckless. Part of me wanted her to fall, not to punish her, but to see where the choices she'd made would land her. To watch freedom reveal what it actually meant for her. There were dark, private moments of doubt. I wondered if what I was doing was cruel. If I was punishing the wrong person. I pictured a life of me, somewhere else, and also a life where we walked through another ordinary morning and laughed about the mess. Those thoughts were brief. The plan had a momentum of its own. It required distance from sentimentality. I sent a message I had rehearsed for weeks. It was short. It was true. It was an echo of the man she thought she'd set free. "You were right," I typed and deleted it twice before settling on the phrasing that felt cleanest. "You were right. It wasn't enough. But at least now, you'll never have to see me fail." I pressed send. Her reply came quickly, casual and stung. "Ethan, what is that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. I wanted my last words to be both a wound and a veil. Then I cut the last threads. I didn't vanish like a guilty man running from consequences. I vanished like a person who had planned his quiet exit. I moved rooms, closed accounts, transferred ownership of things in ways that made legal sense. I notified the people who legally needed notice. I tied up the administrative ends that make absence plausible rather than suspicious. I left patterns, a folded shirt in the drawer, a book left open to a dog-eared page. Little theatrical slips that would encourage people to believe I'd had a breakdown instead of a strategy. Ambiguity protects you. So does plausibility. The final evening, I washed the dishes and left them to drip dry. I put my keys in the bowl by the door. I texted her a photo of a sunset with the caption, "Wanted you to see this." She replied with a heart emoji. I watched the thread for a minute, then deleted the image from my phone. I unplugged the Home Assistant. I recorded a voicemail that said I'd be away for a while, and turned it off. I drove away at dawn. No traffic to slow me. No dramatic last words. The car felt like a coffin that was also a vessel. I drove to a city that wasn't ours, checked into a small, anonymous hotel, and slept 10 hours straight. When I woke, I began the part of the plan that required absolute silence. I changed my phone number and answered only when I needed to. I used a different laptop in public libraries. I walked with a different gait. I learned to make myself small in the way you learn to lower your voice in a library. It became a practice that felt almost spiritual. Her world reacted the way I expected it to. People whispered. Friends called for explanations and received evasive answers. Rumors grew fingers and pointed in every direction. Did he leave? Did he have a breakdown? Maybe he's with someone else. I watched it all from a brittle distance. She filed a report once. Said I'd gone missing. The police came by the house. They asked questions. I left no note to be found, no cliff's edge to photograph. There were no threats received. The officers treated it like a domestic disappearance, rehearsed, bureaucratic. They checked our finances. The story they left with the neighbors was tidy: he'd had a breakdown, he'd fled. They never knew a man could plan an escape like a chess player folding the board and walking away. For her, the aftermath was a storm. For me, it was a clearing. The boxes I kept were few: a passport in a new name, a small amount of cash, a notebook with lines of a life rewritten. I burned the rest of the paper, drafts of letters, business receipts, the little marginalia of a married life. Burning felt satisfying. It was a closing movement I had not allowed myself in our marriage. I did not gloat. I did not watch her fall. I kept to the distance I'd cultivated. The revenge, I decided, was not to ruin her. It was to make myself impossible to find. To render myself redundant to the woman who told me, with flat certainty, that she wanted space. I wanted her to feel the vacancy I'd felt. I wanted her to look at the rooms we'd shared and understand they were not hers by right. But I also wanted to be free of the ache of waiting for her to decide whether I was salvageable. The plan gave me that freedom. On my first morning under my new name, I walked by the river and thought about the last few years. I thought about sacrifice and about how easy it is to hand someone the keys and trust them not to change the lock. She would tell the story the way she needed to tell it, that I'd disappeared in shame, that I'd been incapable. People would take her side. They always tell a bright story. They would say she was brave. They would say she'd done what she had to do. She would not know the careful catalogue of choices I'd made, the legal ordinances read in the quiet, the nights spent setting small fires to paper. She would not know that I hadn't run from shame so much as from the presence of someone who could make me feel invisible and then be surprised. I settled into anonymity like an old jacket. It was comfortable in a way I hadn't expected. In the evenings, I wrote letters I never sent, not to her but to myself, describing the geography of the quiet I'd chosen. The letters were clinical and strangely tender. They mapped a man who had learned to measure his worth in actions rather than in reflected gazes. And somewhere, in the house I'd left, she unfastened the last screws of our life together without looking back. I hoped she learned what survival looks like when stripped of stories. I hoped she understood, one day, the weight of the small betrayals that had stacked up between us. But hope is a small thing. The plan's success was not about teaching her a lesson. It was about teaching myself that I could exist without being needed. That I could rebuild in a place that didn't know my history. That I could become a man under a different name, not because I wanted to disappear from consequence, but because I wanted the quiet dignity of not being defined by a woman who chose another light. I was not vindictive. I was very, very tired. The revenge, in the end, was the slow, clean act of becoming someone who no longer required her permission to live. 6 months. That's how long it takes for silence to stop feeling like punishment and start feeling like peace. My new apartment sits above a narrow street lined with bakeries and bookstores. The mornings smell like coffee and rain. No one here knows my name, not the one she knew, not the one printed on the passport I carry now. Sometimes I stand at the window and watch the world move, and it feels like I'm finally part of it again. Not as Ethan, the dependable husband, the quiet one in her shadow, but as someone undefined. I've learned to appreciate the stillness. The quiet hum of anonymity. No more shared playlists, no more constant explanations. Just the rhythm of my own breathing and the occasional chatter of strangers who'll never ask where I came from. It's surprising how quickly life forgets you once you stop feeding it reminders. Lila, on the other hand, doesn't seem to have adapted as well. The first trace of her reached me through a former coworker who didn't know I'd disappeared. He forwarded an email by mistake, a bank notice about a frozen account, one that used to hold both our names. I'd closed it long before leaving, transferring every cent into an offshore trust under my new identity. Perfectly legal. Perfectly invisible. She'd been trying to access it, apparently, maybe to pay off debts, maybe to fund the life she thought she deserved. Either way, the balance read 0. I imagined her staring at that screen, jaw tightening, realizing too late that I'd never been the fool she believed. When you spend years as the quiet one, people mistake silence for ignorance. They never see the calculations happening beneath it. In the months after she told me to take space, I spent every night learning how to vanish without breaking the law. Reading about digital footprints, offshore holdings, legal name changes. The steps were tedious, but not impossible. The world rewards the patient, and I had patience in abundance. Every signature, every withdrawal, every closed account was an act of quiet retribution. She'd stolen my peace, I simply took back the pieces of myself she'd never valued. Now, watching from a continent away, I see the consequences ripple outward. Friends we once shared whisper about her. He just vanished, they say. No note, no warning. One day he was gone. Some blame me. Some blame her. Most just avoid her, unsure which version of the story is true. Ryan didn't stick around. That much I learned through a mutual acquaintance's post, something vague about toxic attachments and needing to move forward. Typical. She traded loyalty for excitement, and when the thrill faded, so did her accomplice. I can picture her now, sitting in that same kitchen where she ended our marriage, surrounded by overdue bills, staring at the ghost of the life she thought she'd won. It's poetic, in a way. She wanted freedom, now she's trapped in the wreckage of it. I didn't need to destroy her. The world did that for me once I stopped holding it together. A part of me used to wonder if she'd ever look for me, if guilt or curiosity would make her reach out. And then, one evening, the answer arrived in the form of a small newspaper clipping I found online. Local woman files missing person report for husband who vanished without a trace. There it was. Her name, her photo. The story painted me as unstable, emotionally distressed. She'd told the police she feared I might have hurt myself. The irony almost made me laugh. She was right, in a way. The man she knew did die. Just not the way she imagined. I read the article twice, then closed the page. I didn't feel triumph, exactly. More like quiet confirmation, the final proof that I'd become everything she once said I couldn't be. Independent. Unreachable. Free. Later that night, as I sat at my small kitchen table under the hum of a foreign ceiling fan, I took out my passport. The cover gleamed under the light, a name unfamiliar, but entirely mine. She used to say I'd never survive without her. That I wasn't built for solitude. I smile faintly, tracing the letters of the new name. You were right, I whisper. I didn't survive. I became someone else instead. I slide the passport back into the drawer, lock it, and pour myself a glass of wine. Outside, the city moves, buses, footsteps, laughter. Life continues, unaware that somewhere in another country, a woman still searches for a man who's already been buried in the digital graveyard of her memory. I raise my glass to the window's reflection, the stranger looking back. She wanted to erase me emotionally, I say softly. I erased myself literally. A message pops up on my encrypted email, a news alert from my hometown. Authorities expand search for missing man, no leads found. I smirk, closing the laptop. Good luck finding a man who doesn't exist. The sea doesn't care who you were before. It takes everything, names, histories, even regrets, and turns them into salt and silence. I come here often now, to this quiet stretch of coastline where the wind erases footprints before they finish forming. It feels fitting. The perfect place for someone who doesn't exist. Sometimes, when the tide rolls in, I imagine it carrying fragments of my old life, the house we built, the scent of her perfume, the sound of my name on her lips, all of it dissolving into the water, smaller each time, until even memory forgets. Love taught me how to give. Betrayal taught me how to vanish. I close my eyes and breathe in the salt air. It stings a little, like the truth always does, but it's clean. Honest. She'll spend the rest of her life searching for me. But the cruelest part? I'll never search for her again.